You've got a few minutes, but how many minutes have you got? You go first then.
Okay, Senator Ludlam.
So, some of what I'd like to ask you, Mr. Abid, will refer to the Environment and Comms Committee hearing that occurred last week, or a week or two ago in Melbourne, where we were discussing the bill, the SBS funding bill that's about to be before the Senate. And it was claimed that, I think by Senator Ruston, correct me if this is incorrect, that the SBS survey about possible increases in advertising was outsourced and independent. Can I just get Mr. Abid, in your own words, the research that you conduct to understand audience opinions towards the proposed changes and various different options for advertising on SBS, who conducted that research, or was it in-house?
That survey was done by our panel, was it not?
Panel,
why don't you talk about our panel? We have an audience panel, an online panel that is under marketing, which is under Helen's control.
Thank you.
So the research that we did was part of our panel, which includes both SBS viewers and non-SBS viewers, and is representative, and we use it to review much of our programming on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
Can I just check something there? So, but weren't the results analysed independently?
Well, it's just the mathematics of the number. It's a small number of questions. We add up the responses from all of the responses that we get. We add them up, and there isn't really much analysis that happens.
I guess
the report is compiled by SBS,
yes,
not by an independent.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to, like, in terms of the model, because I know where Senator Ludlam, the particular line of questioning that you're talking about was about questioning as to how the model was actually developed, not so much how it was implemented, but how the questions were developed.
Apologies. I thought this was about the audience research.
So there were two analyses of our model, one from Deloitte and one from OMD.
Okay, so the point being that the model was developed independently, as opposed to the model of the other group that we were also comparing it with had been something that they'd just the questions they'd worked out for themselves. Sorry, Senator Ludlam, I just
no, that's all right.
That.
It's an important distinction, actually. So, from which survey or which model does the station draw its views on your audience's attitudes to the changes to advertising that are proposed by the government?
So that was the audience research work that we did through our online panel.
That's in-house. Are we able to get a copy of the questions that you put to them, or the particular research method?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that in the public domain already?
Sorry?
Is that already in the public domain?
Was that in our submission?
I don't think it was in the public domain.
No, I've checked. We last week's committee endeavoured to get it to you, so I should have that ready for the committee shortly. Yeah,
that's great. All right. Well, it might be of value.
So that was asked last week.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't. We didn't have it at the table. But I might just ask you to table it for this estimates committee as well. Did the survey? I'm just going to, if you're able to provide it to us, that'd be great. But I've got a couple of quick questions about its method. Did the survey inform participants that the bill would allow the station to double the hourly advertising limit during prime time hours? Or was it that specific?
I think that was part of the question where we actually said, have we got the wording of the
I haven't got the wording in front
there?
of me, but we'll get it to you properly, but I can give you a sense of it. It was very simple. Essentially, we asked audiences to choose between two different options, to choose between incremental advertising and the current content model, or the current 5 minutes and a reduction in the current content model, which is the implication of the advertising. And we asked them to make a direct choice between those two options.
I guess that's interesting, isn't it? So you put to your audiences the same evil choice that's really being put to Parliament.
Yes.
Well, that's what
exactly. That was what we intended to do.
That's my language, not yours.
Well, I mean, that's the reality of what we're facing. So we asked our audiences the same question of what the organisation's facing, which is, would you rather another couple of minutes of ads and keep the same programs you're enjoying today, or would you rather keep the number of ads that you see today and have a reduction in content? I mean, that's the reality of what we're facing, Senator.
Might come back with some follow-up once we've had a look at what you put to your viewers. If the bill passes, will SBS allow product placement within news and current affairs programs?
No, never.
Okay. Is that in your charter somewhere, or is that just a policy commitment that you're making?
It's a policy commitment.
Okay.
And we would put that into our codes of guidelines.
They're very good. We had a little bit of a debate at that last hearing about charter obligations as it relates to specific programming. I understand there was a story published by Crikey on the 15th of May which was titled "A Broad General Channel Is SBS Ignoring Its Charter?" And that piece cites an internal policy dated 26 March of this year from within SBS programming that states, and I'll quote, "As a broad general channel, we can only acquire programs of broad general appeal." Are you familiar with the Crikey piece that I'm referring to?
Not at all, no.
All right. Okay, so that's going to be difficult to...
I don't generally read Crikey.
It's worth a read. It's worth a subscription.
Budget cuts.
Is that, however... Budget cuts, all right. Is that, however, an accurate reflection of that memo from SBS programming? As a broad general channel, we can only acquire programs of broad general appeal.
No, I think that's total nonsense.
It doesn't sound quite right, does it?
No, it's complete nonsense. I mean, when you look at our schedule today, there's a lot of niche programming and content that we have that is absolutely spot on charter that does not necessarily equate to broad general advertiser friendly content. I think we have a healthy mix on our schedule at the moment.
Yeah.
And how do you determine the makeup of that mix? So, for example, there are quite a lot of primetime programs on SBS 2 that appear to have no remote connection with your charter. 30 Rock, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, what's that got to do with your charter obligations? How do you decide what proportion of your total programming is charter compliant as opposed to what's not?
We have a few ways of doing that. We often look at a heat map, if you like, of our schedule. We look at that regularly in terms of each program is assessed in terms of its charter content. Sometimes it's not linked at all to charter, and we use that to attract slightly different audience to what we might normally, or a younger audience, to be able to cross-promote our other content, to cross-promote something like Go Back to Where You Came From, or cross-promote something like Struggle Street, etc., in those more broader entertainment sort of shows.
One point that might add to this, when we look at our content choices, we're really weighing up the cost of that content and the net cost in terms of what it costs us to buy it versus what we might get in advertising revenue, against the charter impact. So much of our acquired content we would make a profit on, and that profit enables us to make more commissioned content where we very rarely make a profit and is much more driven towards our charter obligation. So some of the shows that you mention will drive a profit that allows us to channel that money into specific commissioned charter content.
Now, when you're looking at your heat map, though, do you have a rough rule of thumb that you apply as to how much 30 Rock and how much
we would love to have more commissioned content and more commissioned hours, and we try to maximise the number of commissioned hours that we have. But obviously, just broad rule of thumb, to commission a show costs you 10 times the amount to buy a show. Yeah. So obviously, with funding constraints, we're limited on that, but we don't set any limit. We try and maximise the amount of commissioned content that we show.
I think there's no doubting, Senator, that we know that we're an underfunded organisation and have been for a long time. We would love to be able to commission more content, more of the... Sorry?
From the former minister?
It's not all about you.
Actually...
I think I've got statements from you saying the opposite, but don't you worry about it.
Yeah, Senator Conroy has feelings.
There was some of those feelings
just
justified.
Pointing out that what he said now contradicts statements he's made publicly previously.
No, actually, Senator Conroy, allow me to correct.
Underfunded for a long period, I think was your exact phrase.
Yes, we were underfunded for a long period, and yes, the last government...
Been underfunded.
The last government did give us an incredible boost to our funding, which helped us enormously, thanks to Senator Conroy, of which I'm still grateful for the increase in our funding, because it did make a big difference. However, we are now in the opposite.
Almost product placement.
I just wanted an accurate statement.
Product placement.
Are you happy with the accuracy of the product placement? Yeah.
Of course, I would have liked more from Senator Conroy, but he did that.
Always. It's a given.
It's a given. But where I was going with that, Senator Ludlam, is that we would love to commission more content, and we have to make a balance. For each one of our channels, we have to do about 1,000 hours of content a year on each channel.
Yeah.
And as Ms Kelly said, it's almost a factor of 1 to 10, 1 to 15 to make versus buy. So we do roughly buy about 85% of our schedule and make about 15%.
All right.
I would love to increase that.
There's no legislated floor of that breakup, 85-15. That's just the best you can do with your budget.
No, we don't have quotas. The ABC and SBS doesn't have content quotas, but 7, 9 and 10 do. I've always argued I'd love to have a quota, but of course that would need to be funded.
Working on it. All right. Just to come to the advertising, and then I'll pass back to Senator Dastiari. Are you presently, your booking rates or your fill rates for your commercial runs, are you presently full in prime time on SBS 1? Maybe just for the record, do you want to tell us how you define prime time?
Prime time's 6 p.m. to 10:30.
6 to 10.
And the answer
weekends as well?
Sorry?
Weekends also?
Yes. Yeah. And the answer is it depends on the show and the program. So it really does vary by night, by program. It depends on what we're showing. Will depend on the fill rates.
Same for SBS 2, I guess. That was going to be my next question. Could you provide for us on notice your average weekly proportion, fill proportion?
I think that's all commercial confidence, because that would actually affect our commercialisation of the network and our competitiveness in the industry.
Couldn't somebody, and there are people who are interested in this sort of things, just sit down with a stopwatch and make that information very public and work out how much you broadcast? I don't see how it could be that secret when anybody who watches your station could identify what your fill rate was.
It's not as simple as that, because, I mean, in any hour we would probably still have 5 minutes of ads, but it would depend on how much of that 5 minutes was paid versus non-paid. So we would have make goods to do sometimes in programs. Sometimes we'd give advertisers bonus spots because we are we have the capacity to give them bonus spots, etc. So nobody could sit there with a stopwatch, as you say, to figure that out.
Okay. Who first raised the proposal to give more flexibility to SBS around its ad limits and its prime time? Whose idea
It came
was
out of the Lewis Efficiency Review.
Was it something that was proposed by the station? Who proposed it to Mr. Lewis?
I think it was discussed in the context of what other options could you do to increase your revenues. And, you know, we looked at other options of increasing revenues across a range of areas. Okay. What I'm trying to get to was, did the idea come from within SBS? And it's not going to be a massive controversy if it did, but did it? Look, in complete honesty, it would have been discussed as one of many options. Whether it was put to us or whether we put it to them, I couldn't tell you. Just finally then, does your charter restrict you from commissioning or screening certain kinds of programs? So the examples that I'm thinking about be something like MasterChef or My Kitchen Rules. Are you precluded from screening that stuff just because you can't afford them, or is there anything that would preclude you, according to your charter, from getting a hold of really mainstream programming like that? We, as a general policy, we use our very limited commissioning dollars to make sure that it is touching on our charter as much as possible. There is, I can think of maybe one show that is not on charter, but it's probably 95% on charter. So we try and limit our commissioning dollars to make programs that are suiting or addressing our charter, and then on our acquisition side, we have a bit more latitude. Okay. But, you know, to answer your question, a show like The Voice would be far greater than our entire annual commissioning budget. So we could never, even if we wanted to do a MasterChef or a Voice, we wouldn't have the money to do that. Okay, it's budget.